Welcome to the Understanding Men podcast, which is basically two guys talking about what men could but don't talk about anywhere near enough. I'm Luke Sutton. I'm with my great friend Fraser Franks. Fraser, how are you today?
I'm really well today, Luke. Thank you. Really well.
Back from Italy. How was your holiday break?
It was chaos and carnage with lots of kids running around, but it was a beautiful time. Really relaxed. And they've just got it right over there. They live a really simple life. The local people there, and I've taken a lot from there to bring back to the UK.
Brilliant. Even an Italian accent as well, or not? Just
my daughter's picking up some Italian. How about yourself? How have you been?
Yeah, really good. Really good. I've been really looking forward to this second episode because the first one we did was such an introductory one that it kind of really got me excited about getting stuck into, really punchy subjects, I guess, and we're definitely diving off the deep end today. So just to let you all know who are listening and watching, today we're gonna start tackling, this won't be just one podcast, but the overall topic. But we're gonna be looking today at male insecurities, which will cover more podcasts than just this one. But today, particularly male insecurities around body image and sex, which I think genuinely, hand on heart, is something that men don't get anywhere near talking enough about. And I really do think, maybe naively, but I'm going to hang on to that there might well be a lot of men who listen to this podcast and resonate with it, but have never had that conversation out loud. So this is very much diving off the deep end, but let's do it. So Fraser, you start us off. In the first podcast, you mentioned about some of the body images that you had in the past, and I thought it'd be a good place to start. Why don't you just talk us through that and what your experience was around that?
Yeah, it's really interesting timing that we're having this as well, because a couple of days ago I was in with the RPA, the Rugby Players Association, delivering, I don't know how I find myself in this position, but delivering a session to all their new intake of professional players around porn culture, sex, consent, and body image came under that as well. And I'm always really conscious, particularly in a team sport, lots of testosterone, lots of alpha males, lots of people trying to outdo each other and compete and stuff like that. And it goes into other areas. It goes into the way that we talk about women, the way that we treat women, the way that we compare bodies, I think is huge in sport. You get in the showers, whether it's your torso, your size of your penis, whatever it might be, you're comparing. And I think when you are growing up, I've also got an 11-year-old nephew that I've spent a lot of time with in the last couple of weeks. And I reflect back on what I was like as a really young, naive 11-year-old, but one that felt like I wasn't normal. And I think a big reason for that is comparison. I think even more so for young kids now that are around that age, it's the influx of pornography and how readily available it is, and the actual stuff that you are going to consume on that or could consume at a young age is quite alarming, which we might touch on in a little bit because that was a big part of the session I did the other day. But my own personal experience, we had a little chat about this before, and I remember a couple of really vivid, and they seem really small, but they can't be that small because I still remember some of them now. I remember one occasion where I've got a cousin that's a couple of years older than me, and just it's really like innocent as young kids, but he had hairy legs and I didn't have any, and he was only about a year or 18 months older than me. And I remember being so embarrassed that I didn't have hairy legs. And I remember going and playing football at his house one day, and there was a comment from a family member, and this is where it sparked it off. It was like, "You've not got any hairs on your legs yet, Fraser." And that family member would never have meant any harm, would never ever remember a comment like that because it's tiny really, but it stuck with me. And I was like, I haven't got any hairy legs, and he has. And I remember going around to his house playing football, and it was a boiling hot day, and I would not take my tracksuit bottoms off because I was like, I don't want one of these comments again. So I really remember that, and I must have been, probably about 9 or 10, and I really remember that. And then I think when you start going to high school, which is why I've started to be more conscious of my nephew who starts high school next week, you get people of all different shapes and sizes. Puberty kicks in. You've got one lad that's got a Tash at 12 years old. You've got another lad that looks like he's still 7 years old. And I just think with young lads, with men, those insecurities maybe develop really early on, really innocently through little comments or comparisons, but they can really affect you and bleed into things that you do later on in life. And I think as men, there's still lots of us with body image issues, whether it's, I was a very skinny kid, very short until probably about 16, 17, where other people were more developed than I was. And then on top of that, in a sporting environment, you're getting chucked in the showers with these people. So there's nowhere to really hide. Although I did my best to hide when I was about 14 or 15. But yeah, you start to develop these and start carrying these little insecurities. And, as we grow older, it might be, your legs, or you might be a bit overweight, or it might be, as I said, it might be the size of your genitalia, whatever it might be. But we never talk about this kind of stuff, we never talk about that. We want to say, we've got it all together. We're absolutely fine. Men don't need to talk about this kind of stuff. Get on with it. And I think a lot of men develop complexes or feel like they aren't normal, or that no one else feels the way that they do. But when you actually have these conversations, a lot of people feel the same or have felt the same.
Well, I want to ask you about that phrase you said right at the start, is that you didn't feel normal. Just explain that. So where did that come from, that comment, about your legs, or did it come from being skinny? What describe that to me?
I don't know. I just felt like, am I the only one worrying about this kind of stuff? And I look at the session that
worrying about your body image.
Yeah,
your body image, and
because it seems like, why should I be worrying about hairs on my legs? And as I've grown older, I've played with players that shave their legs or that literally haven't ever had a hair on them, and it's no issue at all. But I think when you're young and you're growing up and you're going through puberty, you're in a bit of a rush. You're in a rush to get, your first hair on your legs or under your armpits or whatever it might be. You're in a rush to lose your virginity. You want it all now, and you might see other people ahead of where you are, and there comes that comparison. And then I do think when you begin to consume things like pornography and you see distorted body images on there, and you're like, well, mine doesn't look like that, and I'm 12 years old, you then start going, God, well, I'm too embarrassed to sleep with a girl, or, they're going to laugh at me, and all that kind of insecurity starts creeping in. And yeah, I did feel pretty much like I was on my own, because I didn't have anyone to talk to about this. I didn't have a grow up with a father figure in the house or anything like that. We definitely didn't talk to your mates about it. I laugh and joke that I was a little bit like Jay from the In-Betweeners, pretending and making up lies and saying, yeah, I did this and kissed that girl at the weekend and did that. But underneath it, I was just like a really insecure, quite socially awkward kid. And yeah, I think I definitely struggled with a lot of that, particularly in puberty and early teens.
Yeah, I was actually, in the lead up to this podcast, I was thinking about the In-Betweeners, because I think it's a show that, it's hilarious, but I think men find it hilarious because it's like the unsaid sort of humor of how ridiculous everything is that goes through our minds. And I think we find it funny because someone else is saying it, and there's that side to it. I mean, it's really interesting because I distinctly remember, I'm trying to think how old I would have been. It would have been probably about 10 or 11, something like that, I think. I remember leaving a school swimming pool, and at that point in my life, actually, I was a very good swimmer. I was a competitive swimmer, and we had a school event. And I'm not going to name the girl's name because I'm friends with her now, and she doesn't even know about this, which is mad. But as I walked past her, I heard her say to a friend, "Oh, Luke Sutton's a bit fat." And honestly, that comment, I'm 46 years old today now, and I remember it like it was yesterday, and it just had a massive impact on me. And the thing is, what I do think is really worth saying is, obviously, both men and women go through this, and teenage years, puberty affects everyone. It doesn't matter about your gender. I think the point is that as men, we don't really talk about it. Whereas I think for girls, because I think it's a vulnerability, isn't it? So it's almost like a sign of weakness. And, but that comment sat in with me, well, forever, and it kind of made me really conscious about. I always joke as well because it sort of was a reflection of how spoiled I was by my mum, and how she used to tell me I was so beautiful, I was so all this. And so the first time I heard a sort of negative comment, I was like, that doesn't align with what my mum's been telling me. She says I'm perfect. And it just had this huge impact on me. And then I was like forever looking at my body, comparing my body to other people, which I know is a normal thing, but it did carry into my adult years, and that professional dressing room when you all shower together, you're all there. Well, even professional sport, you get body fat tested. It's on you, isn't it? It's part of your life. That comment honestly really stuck with me. Still, like, maybe you're a little bit fat type thing.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's interesting that I think for men it's almost like or maybe I don't want to be in caught in the trap of talking for mankind here. But I'll just say it in my experience is that I think I expect, or I think it's, the women will talk about these things. I just do not expect for men to talk about these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd never have that conversation with another man. Go, oh God, I had this comment and it really affected me for years. I always thought I was a bit fat, and maybe almost got a bit of body dysmorphia about it and all that kind of stuff. It's just like we don't open up that channel in our vulnerability and our emotional capacity to actually say it. It's a strange thing, isn't it?
It's interesting you say that as well. Did you see that a lot with other players in cricket, with like the body fat tests and comparison and stuff as well?
In cricket, it was a lot, because cricket isn't just a physical sport. A modern day cricketer has to be fit, no question of it. And the guys that are playing are very, some of them are extremely fit, but not all of them. Not all of them. It's not like football where you have to be of a certain level of fitness. In cricket, you get a real variety, and you get players who are not, their game isn't reliant on peak physical fitness. A spin bowler or a wicket keeper batsman who might not feel they need to be that fit. So there's quite a variance in body shapes. Also quite a variance in background and culture. A lot of Asian players who, have grown up with a completely different environment around fitness and diet and things like that. And so, yeah, I think there was, and it was interesting because the day you do your fitness testing, and we used to always have a particular day that was dedicated to fitness testing. I don't know, it was almost a little bit like a name and shame type day. I don't know how that was for you in football. Was everyone pretty fit?
It was exactly the same. No, you still get like a lot of different body types for sure. But this point came up. I was on a course at St George's Park about 18 months ago, and a female player talked about this, and it's interesting getting their perspective. And I didn't push back on this, and I wish I almost would have done. But she said she was talking about the differences between the men's game and the women's game. She was a female player, and she said that their fitness coach had posted their body fat scores on the changing room. So they'd all done them, and they posted them on the wall in the changing room. So it was literally listing who had the least, who had the most. And she was like, you can't do that with girls. Like, we're so emotional, and it's different times of the month, and we're carrying water here, and we're doing that. And then she said, it's fine to do it for the men because I don't care about that kind of stuff. And I didn't push back, but that stayed with me on the journey home. And I was like, no, maybe men pretend it doesn't, but if you're bottom or you're labelled the fattest in the team out of 25 lads, you're not telling me that you're not taking that home, and that hurts. And I remember being slightly above or slightly below, or even if it was something else you're being tested on, being at the bottom of it. Like, you're embarrassed, and it hurts you, and you do take it home into other behaviours. Maybe it's the way that you eat. And I've had a few conversations with the work that I've done in cricket around this of, if a player's bottom or is labelled the fattest, they may be going home and not eating that night. And that can develop some really unhealthy behaviours around food and restriction and stuff like that. But I just thought that comment of going, well, men don't really care about this, and going, actually, we all do, but maybe we don't show it, or maybe no one really thinks about it.
Yeah, I think it goes back. Before I say that, actually, I manage Niall Wilson, who's an ex-Olympic gymnast, and gymnasts have unbelievable physiques. Niall in his prime is just incredible shaped body, but their insecurities about their weight and their body were just rife, because it was so in comparison. It's like, how fast can you move? My body's too big. I'm too skinny here. It's just all over the place. Yet to coming off the street and you just look at Niall Wilson's body, you'd go, he looks incredible shape. So I think it exists all over the place. And obviously we're highlighting sport, but I think it does in lots of different aspects. It goes back to, I think on the first podcast, I was talking about that kind of old construct of that a man needs to have all the answers. A man might feel like he needs to have all the answers. He needs to, be on top of everything, be on top of his insecurities, not have body image issues. It's, I'm a man, that's okay for women and they can talk about it. But for a man, no, I can't do that. And I have no statistics to base it on, but on this podcast, there's two of us, and 100% of the people on this podcast of men have had body image issues at some point in their life. And I would hazard a guess that a lot of the men listening, there would be a lot of identification with that. But yet, for some reason, we've got ourselves trapped in this place where we can't acknowledge that. We can't accept that. And I think I know you mentioned it briefly before, but I want us to kind of touch on the impact that porn has had on men in general in recent years. And I do worry for young men. I've got, a son and two stepsons, and without getting too sidetracked, I think the impact of porn on young men has been so detrimental, because those body image issues, and we'll move on to sex in a minute, but there is a depiction of a guy who's, having sex with a woman, and that's what the man must look like during that time when he's having sex with that woman. And for young men with any kind of insecurities that are floating around with that's incredibly damaging.
As I said, it's interesting timing with the session that I've done this week, and I'll talk you through a little bit of that if that's all right, like some of the session that we do deliver around that culture of pornography. So I've got some of the statistics on the top of my head just because I did the session 2 days ago. But what do you think the average age of a young male in this country, what do you think the average age is that they first view pornography? That's a question I usually ask.
Fraser, this is going to horrify me. I think it's going to it's going to upset me. This, I know. I'm gonna. It's obviously low, but I'm gonna say 12 or something like that.
11. So you're not far off. So 11 years old is the average, but they've got a lot of statistical data and research. The average? Yeah, the average. But kids are seeing it as young as 7. And they've got this data from kids that are seeing it as young as 7. And bless them, they're typing in things on Google or when they've got a phone, really innocent things like boobies. That's how young they are. They're typing in things like boobies, and they're ending up on the Pornhub and websites like that, really graphic websites. And I don't think the parenting controls, a 7-year-old can easily get around a lot of those. I look at my little girl, she's 4, the way that she works on iPad, and we try and restrict that as much as we can. But a 7-year-old is quite sophisticated when it comes to that. And maybe, the mum and dad don't think, he's 7 years old, he's not going to go on anything like that. But the average age is 11. Now, if you're getting your first glimpse of sex from a website like Pornhub, then that is an unhealthy way to view a relationship between a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, whatever it might be. So we then, and this is like an interactive fun bit, gets them all going a bit silly, but we get them, before we tell them the average age and stuff, we get them to list, and we say, right, you've got 90 seconds, piece of paper, list as many outrageous pornographic categories as you possibly can in the next 90 seconds. So the rugby boys on Wednesday, they absolutely love it. They're coming out of all these wacky and outrageous categories that you can find on Pornhub. And they have a laugh, and I get them at the front and I read them out. And the point is, we then come on to the average age of the 11-year-old seeing it. If you've got an 11-year-old brother or whatever it might be, some of these categories that you've just shown me, that is what they're seeing for the first time as sex. So they're seeing things like choking and slapping and grabbing and 4 people here and 1 person there, and the guy looks like this and the girl looks like that. For a young kid, it is like, oh my God, and automatically you're going to feel insecure, but automatically it's going to create, a scenario in your head that isn't healthy, that isn't real. Those are actors, and it creates that distortion in your mind. And I work with a lot of football clubs and young players now, and I often get called in on from the outside as like a third party when they have an incident at a club. And I've got a handful of incidences of probably lads between the age of 15 and 18 where they've got a girlfriend, they start to become sexually active, and they'll be a bit rough and they'll slap or they'll grab or they'll do something that the girl is not ready for. But the lad thinks it's normal because it's probably what he's grown up watching and consuming on a regular basis. The girl will then maybe tell her parents or call the police, which we've had on occasions. And then it's like a club investigation. And it's like, where's this coming down to? Well, I think porn probably has a big part to play in it. He thinks this is what he's supposed to do. This is how he's supposed to act. When actually, it isn't. That's a performance. It's not a relationship. It's not healthy. And then on top of that, chuck a sporting environment where everyone's talking about it and telling their own stories. It's a recipe for disaster for me.
Yeah, I sort of jumped in there. It's because you said the word performance, and that I can only talk from my experience, but I think what porn tells men and women, for this matter, is that it's a performance, it's an act, it's like a scene. It's like, this is what should happen, this, and you do this, and then you do this, and it's not. There's no intimacy. There's no there's no connection. There's no. And I'm not trying to sound all kind of like flowery and lovey-dovey. It's not that. It's just that the impression that gives a young man is exactly what you said. It's a performance. It's an act. It's like, we need to tick this box, then we need to tick this box, and we go through in sequence. And this is what's going to happen. And that performance, therefore, there is a total loss of intimacy and connection and respect and boundaries. But there's also pressure. There's pressure for that young man this is what I need to be doing because this is what is told. Whether that young man is able to do it, whether they want to do it, they feel comfortable doing it, that it distorts the whole thing into a place that essentially young men are taking what they've seen in a porn studio into their bedroom. And that's what has to, continue and go on. And my own experience, without kind of like going too far with this, is I had to understand how distorted that had got and understand about reconnect to being about intimacy and it's not just love, but intimacy. It's a kind of different thing, isn't it? There's a gentleness, there's a softness to it, there's a vulnerability to it for man and woman in sex, or man and woman, whatever it might be. But there's an intimacy, a vulnerability which porn eradicates. It says no, especially not for the man. You're the one in charge here. You're doing this, and it's so damaging. I remember when I first started playing professional cricket, and I don't know how this was for you in football, Fraser, but there was 100% a culture of being unfaithful to partners. 100%. No, it's that secret that no one wants to say. But when I started, it was absolutely common culture. That's the way it was. And I absolutely remember, like 17, 18, just go, oh, right, okay, this is what we do, is it? This is how it goes. No, there was no one, and I've been challenged about this by people previously to be, this is boys will be boys type thing. I'm like, yeah, but have you seen the rate of divorces and dysfunctionality that comes out of it? It's horrific. And the alternative is that someone goes up to a young player and goes, listen, what we do around here is we treat women with respect, or our partners with respect. We're faithful. We're honourable. That's an alternative, isn't it? Now, it doesn't mean that every relationship's going to survive, but the message is so much healthier than what it was. And I'm not this is not doesn't make any excuses for any behavior that's ever gone on at all, but it definitely was the culture. And then you just add in this element of porn, and the level of toxicity is just, it's dangerous. I don't know, how was it for you with football?
It was it was exactly the same for me. And I don't want to come across as though like you said before, like holier than thou, and it was, all the other footballers were like this. But when I got chucked into the world of full-time football, I was a 16 years old virgin, didn't have a girlfriend. I was then in a youth team, but I quickly, like really quickly actually in comparison, got chucked into a first team environment. So pretty much, I think it was before I was 17 or just as I was 17. So didn't have much time to adjust to full-time football with players my age. So then getting chucked into a changing room with like 35-year-olds. And I was very, like a young, pretty much a young 16, 17-year-old. And I would often be, I'd be training with the first team. I'd be traveling with them on the game. Often I wouldn't get in the squad, but I was, I was just happy to be traveling and be part of it at that age. So I would often, on home games especially, be put in the box with the wives and the kids, and I'd be, talking to them and playing with the kids and stuff. Then I'd go on a night out with these lads or on a pre-season tour, and I'd see the same thing. And at first I was like, oh my God, he's got a wife and he's got kids. And then it quickly does become the norm where it's like, oh yeah, there he goes again. And some of these, maybe it was their character, they had no remorse and no guilt associated to it. But I saw so many that didn't want to do that, but they felt like they had to. And as I got older, and I'm really fortunate that, sorry, I got a frog in my throat there. I'm really fortunate that I feel like I stayed single for a long time. Like in my, my teens, in my early 20s, had little relationships here and there, but it wasn't until I met my wife and I was a little bit, later down the line, a bit more mature. It was my first proper relationship. But I'd signed for a new club, and one of the first questions you get asked was, are you a straight batter? And I didn't know what that meant at first, but it meant, do you cheat on your partner? And what a question on the first things or on the first nights out you go on, do you cheat on your partner? As if you're supposed to. And I remember saying, when I was with Stacey, it's like, no. And it was some idiot that asked me anyway. And he was like, what's wrong with you? And literally said that to me. And I told Stacey when I got in, and she was like, what is like, who's he pretending to be? And it does become that norm. But I saw so many men with such good families and good morals also just lose that will to say no for 1 hour, and they completely ruin their whole marriage and their relationship with their kids for 1 hour because they couldn't control themselves, because they felt they had to prove a point to the boys and be accepted, and the next morning they get all the plaudits or whatever it might be. And then when I got a little bit older, you started to see WhatsApp groups and team group chats sort of invented, and you get the younger boys in there doing anything that they could to impress the older lads. And that would be, you go on a team night out and they want to prove that they took a girl home. So maybe she was walking to the bathroom after they had sex or whatever, and they take a picture and put it in the group chat and go, look what I've done. And I go around now talking, that's a criminal offence. Like, you get yourself in a lot of trouble for that. But a lot of these young, insecure men, which is what a lot of these people are, and a lot of people that I've come across in football are trying to make themselves feel better by doing this and trying to prove themselves, or they're trying to gain acceptance from a group. But actually, if like you said, and this is why I love talking to like the group of young professionals I spoke to the other day between the age of 18 and 20, and saying to them, in 10 years' time, you boys will be those senior lads. Like, you're getting this message in now. You could be the one that pulls and goes, look, mate, that isn't you. You haven't got to prove anything to us by taking that picture. You don't have to treat girls like that. We accept you. You're enough as you are. I think so many people and men need to hear that. You are enough. And a lot of us don't feel that. But I saw it, I saw it a lot in football, but I also know it happens a lot in an office place. I've been, pubs over the years with mates in different industries and heard the way that they talk about women and girls and sex. And it isn't limited to sport by any means, but I often think it's, if you have conversations like this, people can actually let their guard down and go, yeah, actually, I don't really want to be doing that. That isn't me. And yeah, hopefully, as we said in the first episode, we can have these kind of conversations for people, maybe.
Yeah, I resonate so much with everything you've just said. I remember being approached by a senior player that when I first joined professional cricket, and he said to me, "Listen, we're not faithful until we're 40," and that it's just madness. It's just a bit. I think, and again, I know I can feel myself getting a bit uncomfortable because I feel like I'm doing that holier than thou thing. It's not that. What someone chooses to do or not do, or mistakes people make or don't make, that's life. That's the journey they take. And I've made plenty of mistakes in my time, and we learn and grow from them for sure. But I think the point that I want to make around it is for men, young men, and definitely the impact of porn on that is that it really feeds into the fact that the man should know exactly what he's doing. He is in charge. He's the dominant one. Sorry, I keep referencing man, but I'm obviously talking about, a heterosexual relationship because it's my experience. But, my experience is the man has to be the dominant one. He has to know what he's doing. He has to know, he must be in charge in the bedroom. He must know exactly how this is going to pan out. But you just only have to have a look online at the statistics of the percentage of women that are sort of sexually unsatisfied through their life. It's really high. So, breaking news, I don't think we have got it cracked, it's like, but every message that's coming out is like, we need to be this way. And, I like what you said there, imagine a dressing room where someone had come along, a senior player, rather than say, we're not faithful till we're 40. Someone go, listen, that's not you. You don't have to do that. But likewise, there'd be an environment in which men can be like, I don't know what I'm doing really, or I don't really know how to, satisfy a woman or a man, or I don't get it. I watch it on porn and I think, oh, that's the way it's meant to be done, but I don't even enjoy that. I don't like it. I don't know what I'm doing. When do men ever have that conversation? I've never. That's the sort of conversation that I could imagine you and I have happening, but I don't know. I've never, in my experience, heard a man talk to me like that, or open up like that, or two men do it. I don't know. Do you?
And these insecurities and feelings that I carried, that you carried, that a lot of, I have had some of these conversations with my friends now because we're a little bit older. If we tried to have this at 21. I think we'd have all tried to give it the big end and, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. But some of us are older now with kids and we can actually talk a little bit like this. Maybe not as in-depth as me and you can talk. But these insecurities led me to alcohol. Like, I felt like, and when I did, sorry, Mum, for listening to this, but when I did lose my virginity, I had to have a few drinks. And I felt, what? I can't do this. I don't feel confident enough. I don't think I'm going to last long enough. All those kind of things that you get as a young kid. So I was like, if I have a few drinks, maybe that will help, or at least maybe I'll be a bit more carefree. And as a young player, I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to drink heavily, but it was a sort of social awkwardness around girls anyway that I felt I needed that, but definitely around sex. And I talk really openly with groups of young players about this, but later on, maybe when I did start becoming a bit more sexually active and that kind of thing, I was fine on a night out and I would, take a girl home or whatever it might be, but I'd always be terrified to actually meet up during the week sober with that girl because I was thinking, that means I'm going to have a drink because she ain't getting the version of me that she got the other night because, that was alcohol. So I would often, only really take a girl out or whatever it was when I'd had a couple of drinks, even if it was one or two that gave me that sort of placebo effect, if you want. But I felt like no one else felt like this because it's funny though, because I lived in a house when I was 19 with 3 other teammates and I thought they all had it together and I thought that they had none of these issues. But now we're older and I've had some good conversations with a couple of them. They were feeling the same thing. They were seeing me, with a girl, thinking, blimey, he's got a girl. I need to go and get a girl back then if Fraser's got one, and he must know what he's doing. And it's almost like that cycle of we're all pretending, we're all almost competing at times, but none of us know what we're doing. None of us have got it together. We're all insecure, but actually all pretending to the other one that, you know, we're the strong man that knows it all. But as I said, these conversations are ones that hopefully we can begin to have, because, as I said, not all women have it, and I don't know. I'm not privy to a lot of those conversations, but I would hope they do. I hope a lot of women are as open and, you know, do talk about these things. I definitely think they would talk about it a lot more than we men do.
Yeah, no, I think for sure. But I think that thing of having alcohol to have sex, yeah, I was exactly the same. You know, exactly the same. It was my social awkwardness that alcohol cured for me. It stretched from, you know, literally just saying hello to somebody to having a sexual relationship, for sure. And alcohol took that away from me. But you and I both will know people in our not necessarily in our lives, but we know people who might not have had sex without being drunk for a long time. In fact, so long that they can't remember what it was like sober. I mean, that's quite terrifying, isn't it? You know, imagine it's something as that's, you know, so part of our nature, isn't it, as human beings, is to consummate and be intimate, and we can't do it without having alcohol in our system. And, you know, I know we talked about this a while ago, but in sobriety, we've both been approached by people saying that I don't know how to have sex sober. I've never, you know, I've either never done it or it was so long ago I can't remember. You know, that's, again, it's all part of that act. It's all part of, you know, that lonely island that someone sticks themselves on. And obviously we're talking about men here, but this applies to women for sure in this case. But men who stick themselves on this island going, I need to have all the answers. I need to know. And if I don't have the answers, I've just got to pretend like I do. And we crack on. And it's unhealthy, isn't it?
I've had a good couple of conversations on this with, because people have reached, because I've done some talk about alcohol quite a lot and my use of it. You get people saying, you know, how do you socialize? How do you do this? How do you do that? And the sex one has come up a few times. But what's also come up quite a few times is not the actual act of sex, but approaching a partner about sex. And these, you know, sometimes it's people that have been married for 20 odd years, but they only feel comfortable enough to initiate it with a partner if they've had a drink or if the partner's had a drink, because it's then like, right, this barrier's down, maybe, you know, something might happen. But without alcohol, it's like, right, never going to happen, or I'm not going to try, or there's a little bit of fear there. And I think that's probably come up, for me anyway, equally as much as the actual, you know, intimate moment of sex. It's the approach. How do I approach my partner, or how do I approach it without alcohol? Yeah, hopefully these conversations can spark those thoughts in people. But again, I think as partners, as man and wife, as boyfriend and girlfriend, often that's one that's maybe not even spoken about too much. So again, someone might listen to this and then they might be able to take it into their everyday life.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember that we have told people that our wives are going to come on this podcast at some point. God. So it's just going to be a topic. I guess the question mark. You know, what's the answer to it for men? You know, we're highlighting a problem that we think, and as fathers, or, you know, an uncle, like you were talking about your nephew earlier, we can arrest that to some extent, but how do we culturally shift it for men? How do we create space or knowledge that says to young men, you know, porn isn't where you're going to learn about sex as such? Not really. You know, it's going to have a really detrimental effect on you. How do we do that? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know all the answers either. I think conversations are a big starting point. I think if you go beyond that, it's actually how ethical some of the pornography is that is so freely accessible. And if you put a paywall behind it, or you put guidelines behind it, will less young people view it? 100%. I know, because I do some of this work, that there are campaigns and a lot of websites that deal with ethical porn, which is probably a slightly different angle. Maybe it is a more realistic view of what sex is for a young person. But I think with the media, with social media, like you said, even some of the comedy programs that we consume, chuck little things in there that maybe play on these insecurities that a young man might have or a young lady might have. So I definitely think a lot in the media and social media plays a part. And then, I always, when I do these sessions, it's, how realistic is it to say to a group of young teenagers, right, none of you watch pornography ever again. You'd like to think that maybe some of them don't need to consume it in the manner that they do, but I think we've got a long way to go before there's an actual real setback from it. But there's got to be alternatives, there's got to be conversations, there's got to be, I don't remember having any sexual education from school, any. So I don't know, because I've not been in high schools or anything like that, but I don't know what's being taught, or whether there can be an angle there as well.
Well, no, I mean, there's sexual education and I'm on one level, but I think there's also another thing. My son and daughter, who are twins, both 14 in the last couple of years at secondary school, have had lessons in which sexual education has been taught, the full range, which has been really good for them. But I think there's that education, but then there's the kind of sort of society education for them as to, it's not necessarily what it is or what you do, or it's I think it's more that the attitude and the I don't know, I was going to say approach, but that doesn't sound right. Just the vulnerability of what it's about and being a man. And I'm sure on another podcast we are going to talk about this, but being a man, a strong man in a relationship with a woman or another man, what that is, what you bring to the table. And sex is very much part of that. It's very much part of what attitude and respect you bring that. And if you're bringing this kind of, well, I know what I'm doing, this is what we're going to do, just generally, I think that's going to be a real challenge. And it's that education, it's that, like, we go back to our experience of someone putting their arm around you and going, listen, if you don't really feel comfortable, you don't really know what you're doing, just feel free to say, no one's going to laugh at you. Let's talk about it and we'll kind of work it out between ourselves. That education that I don't know. I mean, what I was going to ask you was, when you did that session with the rugby lads the other day, forget porn for a minute, because we're kind of casting it as in an entirely bad place, which I don't think is totally fair. I'd rather go that angle than not, but I don't think it's totally fair. But just generally, when you did that session with the rugby lads, how did you feel like they were afterwards? Do you think their eyes were lit up? Do you think they, hand on heart, do you think they go away and go, shit, we need to change this, what with our environment, or be better at this? Or do you think they pay lip service to it and they go back and they're back into that old construct of alpha?
Some of them will, 100%. Some of them will. It'll go in one ear and out the other, and they wouldn't be ready for it. But because I've done this quite a lot now, I can see the sigh of relief on some players' faces, because I open up about my own experiences.
Really?
And I've had, and I really want to do that, and I'm more than comfortable, putting myself through that and those vulnerabilities. If it helps that kid that I could have been at 16 or 15, whatever it might have been, I know how much that would have helped me. And I've had good messages off the back of it and stuff. So I think you'll get maybe a third will go, right, I don't care about that, I'll carry on doing what I'm doing. Maybe you'll get a third that are right in that middle group that are key for me, because they're not inbuilt to be part of that rugby lad culture. They're maybe just walking into it and could get swept along. So you could end up, really helping a lot of those guys. And then you'll get a third, I really do believe, that think, blimey, he's just told my story there. And yeah, I don't have to do that. So I think, I'd be naive to go 100% of those are going to be on board. But what I do say is, when I did become a senior player, and I was never involved in this, but what I didn't do and that I regret is I didn't call anything out. I just let it go. So if someone put something stupid in the WhatsApp group or was really disrespectful, I just go, oh God, look at this idiot, and just scroll past, or just let him say what he's saying in the change room. but actually being brave enough to go, come on, like, don't say that in here. I remember we'd get, there'd be people that would come to the training ground and then, or wherever it might be, and you get the lads in there afterwards talking about a certain person in a certain way. And I'd be, in my head, I'm thinking, you can't be doing that. You can't be talking like that. But I would never say it, and I wasn't brave enough to say it. So I think having, creating some of those strong leaders in teams are really good, and people that actually call stuff out. But again, hopefully it just plants that seed where people go, I don't have to be this character. I don't have to treat women this way or talk about them that way. And I can be brave enough, to be myself.
Yeah, I sometimes in my head think, what would I tell my younger self around it? If I could go back, and I've sort of gone on that a little bit, but I've talked about that a little bit. But what's interesting for me is I have a 14-year-old son now, who's well and truly going through puberty, and he's bigger than me, and he's going to be a young man before I know it. He kind of is a young man already, and I sometimes think of when you've got a son, it is like that opportunity to talk to your younger self, and I think the message I'd give him around body image, around sex, around being a man in these situations is what you said earlier. You're enough. You are enough. As human beings, we are all enough. And as a man, you don't need to always show everyone you have the answers, particularly in a sexual relationship. You can be vulnerable, but treat the other half of that relationship, a girl or a boy, with the utmost respect at all times. And I know I'm going to sound a bit too sort of saintly. I'm not saying life's as simple as that. I get, I'm not. But even in a one night stand, someone can treat someone with respect. Always, it doesn't have to be what you see. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, but that level of respect to the other person, I think is what I would have told myself. It's like, because it's respecting the other person, it's partly respecting yourself as well. And just if you don't really know what's going on, I don't know if you'd feel comfortable talking to your dad about it, but I would, I'd be very happy, comfortable having that conversation with my son. But find an outlet to speak about it, and not get trapped in that old construct of what we think it's all about.
I think it is breaking down that stigma, because it is, for whatever reason, it's become ingrained to be an awkward subject to talk about. So one that we just avoid. And even me saying there, I've got an 11-year-old nephew. We walked to the shop yesterday, and I'm trying to reassure him in a roundabout way that he's enough. That, when I was your age, because I knew this podcast was coming up as well, so it's in my head. When I was your age, I didn't have a growth spurt till I was 16, 17. He's like, really? Because he sees me now and I'm 6'2" and I've got a beard. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't have hair on my face until I was 16 and stuff like that. So I'm sort of beating around the bush trying to plant stuff in. But there's still part of me that's holding back going, this the awkward conversation. But, we have to have them. And you made a really good point there about even in a one night stand, you can be respectful. And I always try and put that into the sessions that I do, because I don't want to say to them, right, lock yourselves away, find a girl, get married, settle down, then you can have sex. And I'm like, look, you're young lads, go out, enjoy yourself, explore. And there's literally a circle that I've got at the end where it says give respect, get respect, and it's like a cycle that goes round. And we talk about messaging girls online, which is huge for young lads now, and it's the way that they message girls online. And if you go flying in asking for nudes and being disrespectful and feeling entitled, they're often the cases where you've treated someone disrespectfully, and there's going to be consequences on you, on the club, and I've been involved in these incidences. But I also say to them, look, I'm not a hypocrite. I had single years. I met my wife through direct messages. So you can go and you can talk to girls online. You can speak to them on Instagram, on their inbox or Twitter, whatever it might be. But the difference is I went in there genuinely asking how she was. We ended up meeting up after a little while, not going in going, show us this, show us that. And I think especially with the way that the modern world is, everything's instant. You can swipe on things like Tinder and Instagram and it's like instant. So some of these lads can message a girl and go, you up for it tonight? If they say no, right, on to the next one. And it's like that is creating like just a really unhealthy impatience and instant kind of thing, where you come away from it and you go, look, just be respectful. You can still live and explore and, be sexually active, wherever it might be, if you look after yourself and the other person. So I think that's a good point to make that you made there.
Yeah, and this all goes both ways. I've got twins, boy and a girl, and these messages are as important to my daughter as they are to my son. But this podcast is about, it's focused on men, and so hence that's where it is focused. But I don't want it to appear that this doesn't go all around, and it really does. And the impact that, for instance, porn has on young girls is also seriously detrimental about where it is and what they in modern society should be expected to do, or from sending photos to whatever it is, and that is all feeding into, again, that kind of society of you're not enough, you've got to do this is the performance, this is what we've got to do. And so these messages are as important for young girls as they are for young boys.
That's a 100%. Great point, that is.
Yeah, and I felt conscious about it the whole way through because of my daughter, and and I don't know, am I that protective dad? I guess we all are. I don't know. But the thing for my daughter, she's beautiful and powerful and wonderful, and she is more than enough. And she, I just would always want her to feel like that she doesn't need to be anything that she needs to supplement or fill a gap that because of some sort of feeling. And I think if she feels that and she knows that, she will find healthy relationships, as will my son for that matter, because it's that gap of not feeling enough. And but it's super powerful for us to get that across to young men and women, for sure. Look, if anyone listening or watching agrees or disagrees with us, and I really mean this, like, I welcome it all, tell us we're definitely not here going, this is the world according to Luke and Fraser. It's not. It's just us just talking and being open about our feelings and thoughts and opinions on stuff. But if you disagree or agree with us, please message, put comments in privately or publicly, and we're really happy to look at it. This, we're going to be going through other podcasts tackling male insecurities. This has been about body image and about sex, but we're going to move on to other ones as well. And there is another point of view. There is another way. If we brought Andrew Tate on, this is now 2 podcasts I've mentioned his name, he'd probably say something different to us, wouldn't he? And so, let's have that conversation. A conversation is better than no conversation, as far as I'm concerned. Right, mate. I think that brings us to the end of episode 2. We're flying now. We've, this is like old masters here. I'd just say, there was, just before we started this podcast, there was a fly in the room, which I managed to get rid of. And then literally as I logged on, I found another fly, which I managed to get rid of. And I've just got to the last 5 minutes of this podcast, and there's a fucking fly flying around. And I'm like, where did it come from? Anyway, how are you feeling, mate?
I'm good. I feel like we've covered a lot there. It's gone really quickly, and I think you're in a brilliant position on this as well. Just even for learning, like I use this as learning. But to have twins and have, the boy and the girl angle at 14 years of age, you're in a prime position to see both sides of this and to see or try and understand where these, healthier behaviors can come from for both of your children. And it's what we want to do. We're not here for any other reason than to have these conversations to, take them away from the mic and into everyday life. And I'm really, really confident that if we had a group of men that listen to this, you get a lot of them coming away from it with a sigh of relief, or feeling they're not alone, or actually having a bit of fuel to spark a conversation with their partner or their friends. And just feeling safe enough to talk about these kind of things. So it's done a lot for me, and hopefully it's done that for you too.
Yes, absolutely. Good work, mate. And I'm just conscious that we're not going to have another podcast, or not going to record another podcast rather, until after you've had your heart surgery. So I'm obviously wishing you all the best for that. And, I expect you to stick a podcast mic under your nose within, 38 minutes from coming out of consciousness. No, honestly, I really do. I know it's a big thing, and sending you lots of love and a big hug. And we'll talk about it all when you're out the other side.
I appreciate that, my man. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Understanding Podcast. Once again, you can find us on all the major social media platforms, including Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. We will be promoting each episode on our own social media and on the podcast social media, so please look out for it. Like I said earlier, any comments, suggestions, opinions, please give them to us. We welcome it all. We want to make this as interactive as possible. Also, if you've liked what you've heard, then please go ahead and hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. And importantly, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, then please leave us a review, and a 5-star rating would be wonderful to help other people find us. So for now, thank you for listening and watching, and we will see you again soon.